Hey guys, what's up? Today, what we're going to be looking at is Vietnam and the economic social initiatives. I'm getting straight into it because it might take a little while, but here's the benchmark that we're going to be looking at. Analyze the significance of Vietnam and Watergate on the government and the people of the United States. Very, very tricky benchmark. Let's look at it. Okay, so there's trouble at home. We had a lot of issues going on within the United States during this time, during the Vietnam War. And I'm going to show you a couple that I think really stand out. Nixon at the time became president. He was very, very, very popular. And it's great because he brought an end to Vietnam and he improved relations between China and the United States. If you remember back to another PowerPoint that I demonstrated, that was called detente. I can't write it right here, but DE. It's hard to see. And in 1972, there was a break-in to the Democratic headquarters in Washington, D.C., which led all the way back to the White House. This was a scandal. So despite all the great things that Nixon accomplished, there was some shady dealings going on in Washington. And Nixon was complicit. What do we mean by the word complicit? Well, he was part of it. So complicit means to be part of something. In ordering the retrieval of secret documents so that Nixon could win his reelection, what he was doing was breaking in to find all the juicy information that the Democratic Party had so that he could win his reelection. Now, that scandal's called the Watergate. Why do they call it that? Well, if you look here in the picture below, this is the Watergate Hotel, an office complex in Washington, D.C., Virginia area. And these are two pictures. You might see these on a test where he's pleading his innocence. This is a tape. This is a Watergate tape. It says, "I am not a crook." And obviously the tape's broken, so that's trying to depict that he's lying about something. If we look here, here's another picture with Nixon depicted as Pinocchio. As you know, as his nose grows more, that means he's telling lies. And he famously took the television and stated that he wasn't a crook. And that you see that depicted right here. And the lie really hurt the perception of the presidency and people's trust in the supreme leaders of the country. And then later he would resign before they tried to impeach him. So that's one moment where we're tarnished. Also, Nixon also tried to conceal what was known as the Pentagon Papers. And this was a big one too, because it had explained that the United States wasn't just involved in a limited Vietnam conflict, but they had been involved with the conflict all the way back into the 1950s without the American public knowing anything about it. So that's the Pentagon Papers, and this was released by the New York Times, and it really, really, really made people think twice about what was going on behind the scenes in government. Were they telling the truth? Were they lying? And let's look at Vietnam. Vietnam also had an impact on America and its people. Many Americans at this time, TVs were a hot commodity, and the radio was still popular, but TVs were the big thing. TVs changed the game and how people saw the government and how they got their news. The government had always stated that they were winning the war and that everything was fine, but the media, on the other hand, had always mentioned that we were taking heavy casualties in Vietnam, that the Vietnamese people didn't like us being there, and all the atrocities or murders against the people of Vietnam. Now, between the government and the media saying things, that was called the credibility gap. Make sure you understand this. Credibility gap, very important. Is the government telling the truth or is the media telling the truth? There's credibility there. Who's got more credibility? The government or the media? At any time, pause the video if you need to. All right, let's go to the next slide. How much war power should the president have? Now, during this time, the president was given extraordinary powers in the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. And he could control the military at will. Is that good or bad when you put a lot of power in the hands of the president? It can be good and it can be bad. Now, this leads us in. This is the start of the American involvement with boots on the ground in a full-scale invasion of Vietnam, is the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. This led to a massive troop buildup and a push into neighboring countries. Not only were we in a war with North Vietnam and China, but we had conflict with Laos and Cambodia. So the war had actually expanded into the neighboring countries. What was the answer? Congress had an answer to this. So Congress had an answer, and the answer was the War Powers Act. The War Powers Act took away the president's power and gave more power to Congress to allow an approval process. If Congress didn't want the president to put troops into a country, they could act based upon this War Powers Act. All right, and then lastly, here's another issue that we have here on the home front. Student activists across the country in colleges started to wake up to the things that were going on in Vietnam. They wanted it to stop. College campuses across America, there were protests. And at Kent State in Ohio, there was a massive protest where National Guard troops killed 4 protesting students there that day. And the reason that they were protesting was the war was starting to linger on. What do we mean by linger on? It started taking a lot of time with no real timetable for us leaving and no results at all. People didn't even know truly why we were even there. And the police and National Guard, specifically the National Guard of the military, was called out to dispel or push them out. And somebody shot, according to witnesses, a National Guard's member shot a shot towards somebody, and there was a reaction, and the shootout broke out. And 4 innocent people passed away. This happened in Kent State. And here are some of the victims. And I'm going to leave a link, but I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.